Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. Listener discretion is advised. TikTok, the global phenomenon and social media platform for creating, sharing, and discovering short videos, has taken the world by storm since the start of the pandemic in 2020, and it has not slowed down since. It has cultivated a whole new brand of celebrity and has redefined the notion of celebrity in itself. Joining me on the show today is a fellow podcaster by the name of Kevin Hughes. He and his podcast, TikToking with Kevin Hughes, has tapped into this new form of celebrity with the intent of telling the stories of the people behind the videos you see. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Caught on the Mic. Ladies and gentlemen, since the dawn of the pandemic, TikTok has become a cultural phenomenon worldwide. No matter what your opinions are on who owns the software, how the software is run, it has become a necessity for everyday life. If you have a creative endeavor and you are not on TikTok, you are missing a huge piece of the promotional puzzle. This goes for musicians. This goes for comedians. Anybody that creates any sort of artistic content whatsoever. It is my opinion that if you are not on TikTok, you are missing the boat. My next guest is a man by the name of Kevin Hughes. He hosts a podcast called TikToking with Kevin Hughes, and you can find it on all podcasting platforms, and you can find him on TikTok. Kevin, how's it going, man?
I'm doing good. Michael, how are you? Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, man, thanks for being here. So let's get right down to the brass tacks of it. What inspired you to start this podcast that is specifically ingrained in the TikTok culture?
Yeah. So like you said earlier, in the pandemic, I was never really a social media guy. I had Facebook, I had Instagram. I probably had maybe 2 photos in 10 years on Instagram. I connected with family and friends on Facebook. But so during the pandemic, I had seen things about TikTok, but it was mostly dance videos, and it really wasn't my thing. And then I took a nasty spill and tore my ACL, MCL, and lateral meniscus. So had to have surgery during quarantine. So that was terrible. And I opened up this TikTok app, and for some reason, the way their algorithm works, it connected me with things that actually was an interest to me. So I didn't see just dance videos, and it really got me thinking like, oh, this is really cool. So I jumped on it and I started making these weird like videos so I used to edit movies and TV shows. And so I would get a green screen. I'd put myself in the scene of a movie, and then I would reenact it with just different lines to make it my own. And it kind of blew up, and all of a sudden I had over 100,000 followers, and I noticed how much people really loved these content creators. And, especially this new generation coming in, for me growing up, I always idolized actors or musicians, and these kids nowadays, they really look for these social media creators, whether it's YouTube and now TikTok. And so I thought to myself, I've always been a fan of podcasts, and I tried to start a podcast in the past, and I just couldn't find something that I was very interested in. And one podcast that I'm very particular about that I listen to every single week is Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard.
Yes.
And yeah, he's amazing. And he always interviews these celebrities and, these authors and doctors and all kinds of different people. And I started looking around, and no one's interviewing these social media creators, at least to the fullest. Like they'll have guests on every now and again, but not consistently every week. So I was like, you know what? This might be a good idea to bring some of these content creators on and give their fans a chance to hear who they are and not just what they see on TikTok and YouTube. So from that day on, basically, I did a lot of studying on the equipment I needed for a podcast, how to make a successful podcast, and then boom, TikToking was born.
Sweet. So, creative endeavors for yourself before this, was there anything else that you were kind of involved with or into that maybe paved the pathway for you to do this?
You know, I've always had that creative personality. I took acting classes when I was younger. I've always been into like making. So growing up, we were really, me and my buddies were really into Jackass and CKY. So we would always have a video camera on us, you know, and back then we didn't have the video cameras on our cell phones. So we, you know, we would lug one of those big handhelds around and we would just film everything. And, you know, we have videos, gosh, our whole teenage life and just doing crazy, stupid stuff, being crazy teenagers. And it's always been in my blood. Like I have not enjoyed anything more but to be creative and really trying to involve myself and getting the attention of people. I'm kind of an attention whore. It's weird, but I really am. And podcasting has just, as especially as I've gotten older, I'm 38 years old now, and I just figure, you know, what can I do since I'm in Colorado? I'm not in LA. I'm not in New York. I'm not somewhere like that. What can I do and still have people hear me? And I was just like, you know, podcasting. I love listening. It's funny. I can't even tell you the last time I even listened to the song on a radio. It's always podcasts on my radio now. And I just fell in love with it. And now that's just kind of turned into my dream. And I did a live show back in July. So I actually did my podcast live in front of a live audience at a theater, and had some really big TikTok stars actually fly out to Colorado here and perform for my show and be guests on my show. So and I attempted my first attempt on stand-up comedy. So and I didn't fall on my face, so that was great. It's been really fun, man.
I know yours uses both audio and video. Mine, for the time being, is audio exclusive. So I really wish my listeners could see us right now, because we are telling similar stories. We share similar stories, same exact background. You're wearing a black on black Dodgers hat. I'm wearing a black on black Yankees hat. And in a nutshell, you just talked about how your desire on your podcast is to expose the human experience, more or less, in not so many words. And that is exactly the concept of my show. So it's almost serendipitous that we're here talking right now. Let's talk a little bit more about you, Kevin, and kind of your life, where you came up. You live in Colorado. Why don't you give us your origin story, your personal origin story before all of this came about?
Yeah. So grew up in Colorado. You know, like I said, I always had that itch for the entertainment world. So after high school, I actually went to college and got my animation and special effects degree. And literally, like the week after I graduated college, I packed up my little car with whatever I could shove in there and moved my way out to LA. And at that time, I had one of those big box TVs. So half of my car was my TV. So I didn't bring much. And I moved out to LA, and I didn't have a place to stay. I didn't have a job lined up. I just said, you know what? I'm 21 years old. I'm going for it. So I drove out there, and it was crazy. The next day after I got there, I stayed in a hotel the first night. The very next day, I had an apartment. And then about 2 weeks later, I had a full-time job editing movies and TV shows. Now, I went out there initially to do the acting gig, and then also work for someone like Pixar with my animation degree. But at the time, Pixar was on strike. So I decided, you know, maybe I'll try something different. And I just kind of looked around and happened to go into this Kodak. And I worked for a Kodak here in Colorado, perforating 35 millimeter film while I was in college. And the lady looked at my resume. She's like, well, this is a complete different Kodak. Like, we actually edit the movies and TV shows that come in. And I said, oh, okay. She's like, but let me make a phone call. And boom, the next day I had a job. And really it just I mean, I was doing crazy things, man. I mean, ironically, earlier I talked about how me and my friends grew up on Jackass. Well, one of my first assignments was Jackass number 2. So I ended up working with all these guys and hanging out with all these guys. And I have Bam Margera picking me up in his Lamborghini to go watch, the 69 Eyes the Whiskey a Go Go. And it was just things like that. And they took me to the Playboy Mansion. I got to hang out with Hef and all the girls and during this party. And of course, I'm a nobody. So I'm just observing this and wishing I was somebody, But anyway, sorry, I'm kind of leading on. But yeah, so living out in LA, and then my ex-wife, planned on moving out there with me. She was actually from Colorado here, and about 2 weeks before she moved out there, we found out that she was pregnant with my first son, and I was still an apprentice out there, so you have to go through like a 3-year apprenticeship, right? And I just decided, I think it's best that I moved back home to Colorado. Our families are here, as much as it kills me, but I just don't want to raise a kid in Hollywood with not enough money. And so anyway, I get here and, I'm working all these jobs I've just never been really happy with, and then I discover podcasting, and the first person, and like most people I discovered, was Joe Rogan. And I refused to listen to it because I almost got in a fight with Joe Rogan one time, believe it or not. So he was doing stand up, and I'm good friends with Pauly Shore, and I was at the Comedy Store in Hollywood, and he was doing stand up that night. So I was buying him drinks. Me and my buddy were buying him drinks, even though he drank for free because he was the headliner. But we were doing it out of respect for him. And my buddy stood up in the middle of his act to go to the bathroom, and we were front row. So Joe Rogan just completely nailed him and like, oh, your life is worthless. Go walk onto Sunset Boulevard into oncoming traffic. So I stood up and I was defending my buddy because my buddy's, he's 5'0". And, I knew I could fight, but I know I'm not doing anything to Joe Rogan. He's going to beat my ass, And, so anyway, all was good. Everything got worked out between all of us, but I just refused to listen to his show. And then as I got older, it kind of grew on me, and I was like, God damn it! As much as I don't want to like it, I love the show. And then I got introduced to Armchair Expert, and that's just been a huge impact. And I thought to myself, this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So yeah, now I'm remarried. So we're in a combined family. I brought 3 kids. My wife brought 3 kids, and then we had one together. So we've got a Brady Bunch going on over here. But yeah, it's that's kind of my story up until this point. I mean, it's been a ride, but a fun one.
So my introduction to podcasting was Talk Is Jericho with Chris Jericho. It was like the attrition from Jericho to listening to Rogan to going on and listening to other people like, Dax Shepard. And I work a lot with the MMA community, so I listen to Ariel Helwani and Daniel Cormier and stuff. So again, drawing another parallel to you, sir, you saw me just sitting here nodding. I'm like, yeah, yep, that tracks. That follows the similar trajectory. So far on your podcasting journey, without like trying to pick a favorite child, is there a specific episode that sticks out to you more than the other episodes that you've done?
Oh, that's really a tough one because, what's crazy is about 90% of my guests, I had never met before. First time meeting them was on my show, and I've actually become really good friends with a lot of them. And we've built this relationship. But I think if I had to pick one, it would be Rebecca Jo Dunham Baruchel. She was a model. She's married to actor Jay Baruchel. And it was really weird because she was my 4th episode. Mm-hmm. And it was the first episode where I literally just sat back and I felt like I was having a conversation with a good buddy. And I had never met her before. We just had that weird connection. And it was really cool. And it really, at that point, made me, I guess, feel like this is what podcasting is. Because I think with the first, 3 episodes I did, I was a little nervous. I was like, okay, how do I do this? I hope I don't stumble. I got to make sure I do this. But with her, it was just such a perfect flow. It was so comfortable that the flow just kind of, it was great. It was perfect. And I think if anything stood out, I think that would be the one.
Do you ever worry about the prospect of pod fading? For those of you that are not familiar, pod fading is a term, and I've actually brought this up on some of the videos that I've made in the past, is 75% of all podcasts that launch in a year cease to exist after that first year. Every podcast kind of starts off strong. You get your friends and family into it. Then you start to grow and you start to grow and start to grow. And then eventually you plateau. So you feel like the public is losing interest. So you start to lose interest. And then eventually that show kind of fades away. Do you ever worry about that ever happening with you? For full transparency, I occasionally worry about that with myself.
I'll be honest, it hasn't really crossed my mind. And the reason being is, I mean, let's be real. I knew coming into this, there's already millions of podcasts out there. And I know it's a really hard industry to break into. I mean, if I would have got into it in 2010, 11, it would have been perfect, right? I mean, everybody at that time that had a show kind of got big because there wasn't many out there. But I knew coming in that was kind of a possibility. And it was going to be really hard to gain an audience. But I think with what my idea was and what I've done with mine with TikTok, I mean, TikTok is doing nothing but blowing up more and more and more. And there's unlimited guests on there. I mean, we're talking billions of people, and I think I'm going to be able to hold on strong with guest wise, because now I'm at the point where guests are coming to me because my podcast is so much well known. And that's nice because then I don't have to do it, because that was a lot of work. I mean, reaching out to managers and emails and Instagrams and So I really haven't thought of that, but I also in the back of my head has said, okay, right now where I'm at, I still have a full-time job, but I still do this on the side, and this makes a little bit of income, but I mean, it's not enough. And if that's all it ever is, then so be it. But right now I'm just having fun with it, and I'm not thinking about the what ifs. I'm just trying to look forward and always stay positive about it.
Good for you. Because I personally believe that consistency is the key to success and a key to preventing any kind of pod fading whatsoever. Again, drawing another similar parallel, it's for my show in particular, I know it's kind of taken off a lot further than I thought it was going to. Like, I thought it was going to be, friends and family, well, everybody's going to be done in person. We're going to sit down. And I felt that it was socially irresponsible to be doing a podcast in person during the peak of the pandemic. So that's when I switched over to remote. And that's kind of what blew my show wide open, because I was in the music industry for 20 years. So I got to exploit all those contacts that I had over that time. And, whether it be in the music industry or in the MMA world or other forms of entertainment. So I can definitely empathize and agree with your stance on where things are going. Let me ask this, because I know this is something that I run into as well. Do you feel that sometimes, because podcasting is such an unconventional medium, it's not TV, it's not radio, do you feel that promoting it through social media is a little bit more difficult but a necessary evil?
Yeah, it is very difficult, and I think it is necessary, because honestly, I don't think at the beginning, I don't think I would have been able to establish an audience, or people would have been made aware of my podcast without, constantly posting every episode on Facebook. And then the problem I had was TikTok is very particular about what they kind of allow out to the world to quote unquote the For You page. And it seemed like anything I put on there that was a clip of a podcast I had, an episode, or anything podcast related, they just wouldn't send out. And I got, I was only getting, 500, 600 views compared to my thousands of views on my other videos. So that made it a little tough. What I think has helped me the most is when I connect with these people on TikTok. Not only I'm going into their lives on some of them and asking them if they would be interested, if it's someone that I've been either seeking out, or if I'm watching them and their energy is right and someone I can have a conversation with. And so other people in their live stream, if they have hundreds or thousands of people in there watching, are hearing their response to wanting to come onto my podcast. And I think that's attracted other people to my page, which I have links to my podcast on my page. And but to answer your question, I'm sorry I kind of go off a little bit.
No, that's okay.
I do think social media is necessary. I mean, everybody and their hamsters have podcasts, you know what I mean? And it's a really hard thing. And that's why I think I jumped on YouTube as well. And I'm really starting to establish my YouTube. It wasn't anything for months. I had, just the audio coming out, and I didn't really know how to do the YouTube. Like I told you, I wasn't really a social media guy. I would watch YouTube all the time, but I never knew how to really grow an audience on there. And I've really been studying. And so I started putting my podcast on YouTube, and that's been helping a lot too. And I just think, let's be real. Social media is free advertisement. You can pay thousands and thousands of dollars for advertising, or you just put it on Facebook and Instagram and see where it goes. And that's been good enough for me. That's helped out. And then word of mouth has really grown my podcast to what it is today.
The challenge that I've noticed is if you utilize Facebook by itself, Facebook is like a echo chamber algorithm. So you're really just talking to the people that are already engaged with you. You're not finding any new users. Instagram is similar, but Instagram does a lot more suggestive advertising than Facebook does, and this is where TikTok, going back to the initial point, this is where TikTok is kind of becoming king, because in my opinion, it is the last pure algorithm that is not strictly driven by advertising. Where Facebook is driven by advertising, Instagram is driven by advertising, TikTok is driven by its users. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that I personally like to do is flip back and forth on my TikTok account between it being a personal account and a business account, because I get different forms of engagement depending upon how I have the account set up. That's a hack for all of you that are looking to promote something through a TikTok. But really, the core of my question came down to this. Do you get nerdy about your listening statistics, or do you check your listening statistics on the audio version of your podcast?
I do. I really was bad about it at the beginning. Yeah. And I kind of got to a point where I was getting overzealous about it, and I was doing it too much. Yeah. And it was taking too much of my time, like TikTok. And, ironically enough, you get on TikTok and it's just hours of scrolling. Well, I felt myself checking my statistics at least twice an hour.
Oh, wow.
And it was making me upset. And what I came to learn is, well, you're not getting any extra views this hour because it updates daily. So, right. So I'm like, I'm getting frustrated at myself, and I'm like, why isn't this working? But then the next day I'm like, oh wait, why is it working more at night? And then boom, it clicked. But I'm not too worried about it anymore. I think I've established a big enough following and audience to not really have to worry about it. And I just kind of want to make this a fun thing and just want to go with the flow.
Sure. I can totally appreciate that. And where I was going with that is usually I will check my statistics in comparison to my social media engagement. And it's like, I'm not getting a lot of social media engagement, but I'm getting a metric fuck ton of listens to my podcast. So it's like, how are they finding it? Right? Like, how are they engaging otherwise? If they're not directly engaging with me in social media, how are they finding my show and listening to my show? And the way the statistics work on podcasts, and I'm sure you are already aware of this, The only ones that are accurately tracked are the downloadable sites. So you're like Apple Podcasts but Spotify is not necessarily accurately tracked because it's a streaming service. So a person has to listen to X amount of time of your podcast for it to count as a listen. So I don't know. I get nerdy about that stuff every once in a while. And as from one podcaster to another, I just kind of wondered if you did too.
Yeah. And now that you say that, I mean, I didn't realize that about Spotify. Honestly, like I said, I've kind of just let it be what it is, you know.
Yeah,
and so I didn't do any studying on that. So, and I think Spotify is probably my most listened to platform.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize they had to listen to the full episode. So there could be actually more out there. And now you're gonna have my wheels turning, and I'm probably gonna have to probably get off of this and do some studying and do some more homework.
It's funny you say that, because when I started mine, I thought Apple Podcasts was the thing. I thought it was like everybody's listening to podcasts through Apple Podcasts. That is the end all be all. And then when I started promoting mine, it was like, man, it's so much easier to promote a podcast off of Spotify than any of the other platforms. And there's hundreds of platforms out there.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I thought Spotify was it. You know, I did hear about Apple Podcasts, but at the same time, I didn't realize that Apple Podcasts was available to everybody. I thought you had to have an iOS device. And I knew Spotify and iHeartRadio, they're kind of everywhere, you know? And so I thought that was the place to be. So once I was on Spotify, I was like, yes, I made it, you know? And then when I got on Apple and I realized that, you know, it was available to anybody and everybody, that, you know, okay, there is a lot more out there. And I think that those two especially are probably the biggest. But, you know, I found that a lot of people listen to Breaker. They do listen a lot on Google. And honestly, I've and this may help you for whatever you decide to do with your podcast, but a lot of people enjoy watching podcasts more than they do just listening. So that's why I've kind of turned towards YouTube. Yeah.
And that's honestly personal critique of myself. That's something I'm very well aware of. You know, I luckily or unluckily, depending upon where your vantage point is, I had COVID back in January. So I encoded all the episodes I had, audio versions of the episodes that I had, and put them on YouTube. And I did have a little bit more engagement. I had a spike of engagement after I did that. The only problem is I'm not consistent with it, and I kind of suck at it. So I do eventually want to integrate a video portion, and I've talked about this several times, but I want to make sure that I nail my structure down a little bit more first. And that's actually where I was going to go with my next question. How has your interview structure or your interaction structure with your guests changed since you started the show versus right now?
So I always have a list of written questions. And I felt at the beginning I was going off of the script more than I was just kind of free flowing.
Yeah.
And I feel like a natural conversation, and I have learned that a natural conversation always ends up being a better conversation, and it's better. It's easier to listen to. It doesn't feel like Dateline NBC or something, you know, where you're just like interviewing and pounding with questions. And so I still write up a list of questions, but I only go to them if maybe the guest is nervous, so they're not talking as much as they normally would, or their questions are or their answers are very vague. And so I think mostly it has changed in that way. It's kind of turned into less of an interview and more of two friends just kind of hanging out and getting to know each other.
I know something I've experienced, and maybe you've experienced it too, is the moment I stop recording, the best shit comes out.
Yes. Yes. Or you remembered that one thing you wanted to ask them or talk about, and you're like, shit.
Yes.
You didn't even mention your podcast, man. Like, that was the whole reason you came on.
Right. No, I don't know how many times, and it's always with the biggest guests too.
Yeah.
And it pisses me off because I'll hit stop record. I won't say who, but it's happened on 2 different occasions with very well-known musicians that I've had on my show. I'll give that clue. And I stopped recording, and then we've gone on to have another half an hour long conversation remotely like this. And I'm like, why didn't I just let the damn thing roll?
Yeah.
The best shit just happened, and it's happened twice.
I know. And so on the flip side of that too, I've also had guests. So I don't really have like a time frame on my podcast. I usually like to stick around an hour, but I mean, if it's flowing and it's flowing good, I just let it go. And I've also had it on the other side to where, I mean, we're like 2.5 hours in, and I'm just beat, and I'm like, okay, we got to end the show. And then once we get off, we still have another 2-hour conversation afterwards. I'm like, well, this was really good stuff, but I don't think people would love a 5-hour conversation episode, but yeah. So, I mean, I totally understand that, and I totally get it. And I've had the same happen to me several times. But I think, and I've listened to your show. Your show's phenomenal, and you have amazing guests. And
thanks, man.
I think what you've done and where you've gone with it, I don't think you have anything to worry about. You're doing just fine.
Thank you. I love the fact that 2 guys that are kind of doing a similar thing can kind of hash out the minutia of what goes into it, because, the people behind the scenes don't always understand that. How many times is somebody that you know personally, a friend from your personal life, let's say you're doing a TikTok live, and your purpose of doing the TikTok live is to promote your show, and somebody that you know has crashed your TikTok live and is like inundating you with personal questions. Has that happened to you?
Actually, it hasn't. So, okay. So, and this is where I need to maybe do a little more, but I don't go TikTok live very often. I think I just hadn't found my reasoning behind it, and I didn't think talking about my podcast was interesting enough to a lot of people, at least the way I was presenting it, to where they wanted to stay in the room. So I just never felt, for me, doing a live was very, it wasn't positive enough for me.
Yeah.
And I found that being guests on other people's lives was more interesting to me, because they know nothing about my podcast. So I'm talking to someone like I am with you, and I was having that interaction where with my live, I would start something, and especially when you first start going, you don't really have many people watching. So I feel like I would start promoting my podcast, and then the audience would be gone, and then it would grow again. So I'd have to start over. I'm like in the middle of the conversation. I'd be like, okay, where I was going. And so I just don't use TikTok live that often. So, or any live, I should say, at all. So I have not experienced the personal friendship, asking personal questions.
Oh,
so.
Man, like it happens every single time, which I'm okay with, because it gives you good talking points. But man, it's like when the wife's friends jump on and start asking me, why don't you give a shout out to your wife? And it's like, God damn it, I'm trying to promote my show here. But, one thing I found, and one thing that I advise specifically my musician friends on, is if a social media network has a live feature to it, figure out a way to leverage it, because you will actually get genuine non-bot follows of people that are going to engage in your content, even if you only get one. Every time I do a TikTok live, I gain about 20 new followers. Now, I don't have nearly what you have as far as TikTok followers, but I do find a lot of success by doing lives and just picking random topics and trying to get people to engage in those topics, almost like you're doing a live podcast. Very similar to what you did live in the theater there in Colorado.
So I need to, me and you need to have a conversation then, because I think maybe you have broken that seal and figured out what people want to see and what they want to hear, and I just haven't yet. So you and I maybe off the air need to have that conversation.
Yeah,
You can help me.
Vice versa too.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to figure out how to get my follower count up, and so we can help each other, brother. This could be a partnership here.
Yes, let's do it. I'm in.
Sweet. So, what are some things you're looking forward to in the next couple of months with the podcast?
Honestly, so having that live show I did in July has sparked a lot of unforeseen opportunities. I had so many people interested in the live show, and so for example, there was a producer at my live show and came up to me after the show. I had no idea who it was, and he's like, "Hey, so we're filming this Pawn Stars on the road here in Denver, and that's why I kind of showed up to this, and I think you'd be great. So you want to come film with Pawn Stars on Sunday?" So like I'm on an episode of Pawn Stars that comes out, I don't know, in a few months or something. And also it has sparked the attention of people wanting me to take the live show on the road. I've had some opportunities in Vegas and possibly New York and LA. And really, I'm looking forward to that. That's what I want to do. That, I mean, I absolutely loved it, and bring this podcast to a live version, and the only problem I have is trying to figure out my time constraint. Like I said, I have a full-time job on top of this, so it's really, really hard. Like, you only get so much vacation a year, right? So I got to figure out at what point do I need to say, okay, well, maybe podcasting is what I need to do full time for it to be successful, and I got to let go. But we got to convince my wife about that first, because she's not on board about that. but yeah, I think that's most exciting for me, and I have some really cool guests coming on the show here soon, and you being one of them. We're doing a show swap, which is awesome.
Yes,
and I'm just excited to see how far I could take this thing. I at first I thought it would be a cool little side hobby, and now it's kind of turned into, could this be my full-time job soon?
Right.
I don't know. So we're just kind of waiting and seeing.
So who's a TikToker that is your big get? Or name a few TikTokers that are your big gets. Who are the ones that you really want to have on your show that you haven't had on yet, that maybe you've had a hard time reaching, because that could be another area where we help each other, brother.
Sure. Yeah. So Mr. Beast, I've been trying to reach him. He's more in the YouTube world, but it would be very fascinating to really talk to him. I mean, he went from 1 million followers in 2017, I think it was, to 45 million or whatever he has now on YouTube. And he would be very interesting just to kind of learn how he kind of progressed in the social media world. Another person I would love to talk to would have to be Haley and Kendra. I don't know if you know them on TikTok, but they are a gay couple. They recently got married, and they are just the most down-to-earth, cool, chill girls I've ever seen in my life. And I think they would be a blast to have on. And, honestly, there's so many. There really is. I think the creativity on TikTok is kind of endless, because it's like every day I find someone new that I'm just like, holy cow, this guy or this girl is extremely talented. I want to talk to, so it's not just one person I want to talk to. It's a hard question. I'll be honest. Yeah, it really is. So I'm kind of all over the place, but if I had to choose two guests for the next week or two, those ones would be the ones.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because I always feel awkward asking somebody from TikTok to do the show. It's like, hey, I think you'd be a really good fit for my podcast. And I'm like, podcast? I've never even considered being on a podcast before. Yeah. Have you run into that too?
I have. Yeah. It's, they're, so I'm about 60-40. About 60% of them have said, yes, I love doing podcasts. I've done a bunch of them. But the other 40% are like, I have never done a podcast. I don't know if I'd be any good on a podcast. And that's when I say, let me message you my information and let's have a conversation. And then I can
Right.
tell them, like, hey, I understand it's a little nerve-wracking and you don't know what you're gonna say, but I have everything in line, and the show will be prepared enough for you to just sit back and really just talk to me, answer some questions, and we'll have a good time.
Yeah, usually my spiel is check my shit out, look at my content, maybe listen to an episode or two, and realize that everybody's kind of on the same playing field here.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, sir, this has been fun. This has been kind of the podcast about podcasting.
Yeah.
Very meta.
Yeah. It's, I like this. I like being on the other side of the mic, like I'm so used to being the interviewer, quote unquote, and not the question answerer. and so I kind of like it. I kind of like talking about myself. I'm an attention whore. I told you that earlier. So I kind of like talking about myself and telling people what I've done.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm glad we got to connect, and I'm looking forward to doing your show as well, because I have a feeling mine is going to be far less about podcasting, more about music when I do your show, and those that have known me for a long time they're probably listening, nodding their heads at that. So this is awesome, man. It's been a pleasure connecting, and man, I tell you what, Kevin, the world's a better place with you in it, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you having me on the show. And to go along with your music thing, I've heard some of the guests that you've had on and what you've talked about, and we have a similar taste in music as well. So I think we were meant to do this, man.
Yes. Well, the first of many, my friend. The first of many. All right, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, brother. You take care.
Once again, I want to thank Kevin Hughes for being on the show today. Make sure you check out his show, TikToking with Kevin Hughes, on all forms of social media, especially TikTok. And look out, pretty soon, your boy Michael Clark is going to be making an appearance on TikToking with Kevin Hughes very soon. Make sure you give me a follow on all forms of social media by searching out Caught on the Mic. It will have my ugly mug as the profile picture. And give me that 5-star review on Apple Podcast app as well as the Spotify app. You could also check me out online at www.caughtonthemic.com. This has been Caught on the Mic with Michael Clark. I'm Michael Clark. Until next time, thank you.